In this module, you'll learn how to create a problem definition and write a political statement. This is the first step in conducting a policy analysis that is used in the first two phases of the policy process: to identify a policy problem and to gain support for addressing the issue by getting it on a political agenda. Once an issue garners sufficient political support, proposed legislation will be formulated for congressional approval. Public policy problems may be defined in a myriad of ways, such as an issue of values, politics, economics, a lack of technology, a failure in policy design or management, or an issue of risk. While all of these perspectives may make sense, each one offers distinct insights into both fundamental and more immediate and direct causes of public policy problems and their solutions. Keep in mind, often the way in which we define the problem influences the way in which we try to solve it. For example, climate change has been defined in terms of uncertainty surrounding scientific findings and technological predictions. As such, most of the action taken has been to collect more data and refine models to predict sea level rise. Climate change has also been defined as too much CO2 in the atmosphere, with the proposed solution to lower CO2 by a specific percentage. One action taken was to set CO2 limits on power plants. Defining a policy problem is both parts arts and science. It takes practice, and you will refine your definition several times as you learn more about the problem. So here are some tips to guide you in the process of creating your problem definition and writing your political statement. Let's begin with the basic requirements for a good problem definition. You should word it in a way that is important to relevant stakeholders. It must be precisely worded to avoid confusion. Beware of issue rhetoric and falling into the trap of making false associations. For example, teenage pregnancy is more likely to occur with high school dropouts. While there may be some correlation between teenagers that drop out and those that have early pregnancies, this is not a causal relationship. That is, you will not get pregnant because you dropped out of high school. Which brings us to the next point. Formulate your definition in a way that you can collect data objectively and in a way that contains measurable variables. In the previous example, the analyst may be tempted to collect data from individuals that became pregnant after they dropped out of school to make this correlation appear statistically significant. In an objective analysis, the analyst would either collect data from all high school dropouts or from all pregnant teenagers within a specified range of demographics, that is, age, race, income, and specific locations, regions, or states. I find it helpful to begin by looking broadly at your problem and the associated factors and perceptions in order to guide your research. You can do this by considering the very broad connections between how your problem is defined, the way people view it, and other influential variables surrounding the problem. It is also important to narrow your scope. Identify your relevant stakeholders. Identify specific locations or timeframes. This is important to do when you have a fixed amount of time to complete your analysis, like in this course, or when there is not a lot of information on the topic. Now that you have a clearer picture of the problem, you can zoom in on a particular slice of the problem and begin collecting facts to formulate evidence. Thinking about our teenage pregnancy problem again, we may narrow our definition to addressing the more specific problem of teenage pregnancy as a problem of policy design, based on inadequate access to sexual education, information, and birth control. How might this framing of the problem in those terms influence policy formation and implementation? What unintended consequences might occur? Another step that is helpful in the process of creating your problem definition is to identify the associated policy goals and objectives, as these often represent the inverse of the problem. For example, reducing teenage pregnancies may be identified as a policy goal based on how we define the problem. One measurable objective may be to increase awareness of and access to birth control measures. Lastly, review your problem and review it again. You want to be sure before you write up your statement that you provide the answers to the following questions. If you can do that, then you are ready to submit it for feedback.